Guatemala, Central America. According to most mainstream scholars and archaeologists, the earliest human settlements in this region date back over 14,000 years. Here can be found numerous ancient artifacts, and among them is this one, the figure of a man lying inside what appears to be the shell of a turtle.
And when I asked the local archaeologist there, what is this? They said, without the flinching of an eye, well, this is, according to legend, the giant flying turtles which flew around in Guatemala. The entire body is aerodynamically fashioned. The extremities are pressed in an aerodynamic fashion against the body of this turtle. And if you look closely, it's as if there's some modern-day fighter pilot glasses or goggles. This right here is from the same culture, from the same region where they created a turtle in clay. So they knew exactly what a turtle looked like. It looks like a snapping turtle. And what we have here, that is everything but a turtle. It's something else. In their frame of reference, they were able to use the turtle as the best example of what they might have seen that the gods used to fly around in.
Halfway around the world, in 329 BC, the Greek ruler Alexander the Great planned the invasion of India. But according to ancient texts, his army was supposedly thwarted by a strange attack from the skies.
As Alexander's army was getting ready to cross the Indus and invade India, suddenly in the sky appeared these flying discs. And they began dive bombing at the war elephants that were part of Alexander's army. And what these flying discs did was cause stampedes within Alexander's own war elephants, who then ran amok throughout his army, tearing up the camps and everything. And after that, Alexander's generals met with him and they said, no, we're not going into India. This is it. We're going to turn back. And that was the end of that war campaign.
But whether in ancient times or much more recently, so-called flying saucers are often described as being unaffected by gravity or the basic laws of physics.
You know, I know that people who have seen extraterrestrial vehicles in modern times have said, how in the world could it be doing that? For example, it's moving through the sky and it's going 20,000 miles per hour and makes a right-hand turn without decelerating. That isn't possible using normal aerodynamics.
When jets have been scrambled after flying saucers, the saucers are described as suddenly turning at right angles at super speeds and just zipping off in what seems like impossible aerobatic maneuvers. And that can be explained as the kind of technology they're using, which is a gravity control. It's artificial gravity.
Over the past 50 years, NASA has sent astronauts into space inside large rockets. This method has been described by some as simply putting a man on a large firecracker and lighting the fuse. Man's ability to travel farther into space will require more advanced propulsion systems. Several are being researched by NASA.
There are a wide variety of advanced propulsion technologies that are being actively developed and studied by NASA and other researchers. A really exotic version of that is to use a launch assist catapult. You use technology derived from the magnetic levitation trains to build a maglev sled that carries your rocket, gets it up to about Mach 1, and then launches the rocket from it.
While these futuristic propulsion systems seem like something out of science fiction, ancient alien theorists believe past civilizations possessed these same advanced technologies. They point to a number of cultural myths that describe sky people coming to Earth in fire-breathing dragons or metallic-looking machines as proof of extraterrestrial visitation.
In my mind, legends and myths are based on something real. And while they've been mythified and exaggerated in many cases, in my mind, some core of truth here, in that people really were flying in airships in ancient times, just like we do today.
But might these airships have reached Earth using the same type of propulsion systems we use today? The answer may be found deep in the Indian subcontinent. India. Over 1.1 billion people crowd its modern cities and rural townships, speaking hundreds of languages and practicing a number of different religions. India is considered one of the oldest civilizations, with settlements dating back over 11,000 years. It is also home to several of the oldest records of ancient technologies. Ancient Sanskrit texts dating back as far as 6000 BC describe in varying but vivid detail flying machines called Vimanas.
Vimanas are aeroplanes, and they are powered by some jet engines. This seems to be true because all the description of the flight behavior, elephants ran away in panic. Grass was thrown out because there was a lot of pressure from behind those Vimanas. So that we can say this is a description of the spaceship.
Although mainstream historians believe the Vimana texts are myths, many of the documents contain passages that seem to describe modern machinery and technology.
The Vimanika Shastra goes into metals that are used in these craft. It talks about electricity and power sources. It talks about the pilots and the clothing they have to wear. It talks about the food that they eat. It talks even about the weapons that are kept on these airships.
The flight manuals of the Vimanas are quite similar to the flight manuals you find in the modern passenger flight business, or when you go to the military jet engines. Of course, they have also flight manuals because it's necessary for a pilot to get knowledge about his plane he wanted to fly with.
We also learned that these Vimanas could be controlled mentally. And this is a technology that modern militaries are beginning to develop.
Even today, with as advanced as we think we are, almost every manifestation of an actual extraterrestrial civilization today would look almost like magic to us, where it has to do with technological electromagnetic systems that interface with coherent thought and organized thought. And this gets into people go, wow, now you're losing me here. But I tell people, I said, yeah, well, you got to push your boundaries a little bit if you're talking about a true interstellar civilization.
If, as ancient astronaut theorists believe, extraterrestrial beings have been contacting us throughout the centuries, then what are they trying to tell us?
It appears again and again that here on Earth we're dealing with something that could be called the hidden directorate, a directing force of intelligent beings who may even be our progenitors and have been working with humanity ever since we began evolving on this planet, and will intervene at key points to try to nudge our development in a certain direction.
Why were some of our ancestors told to construct a building or to build an ark? Personally, I think to ensure mankind's survival. There are stories of malevolent gods, of malevolent extraterrestrials. But by and large, the stories that we have from ancient times, the gods were actually very benevolent. And these extraterrestrials have helped us throughout the millennia to survive to this day.
One of the oldest and most widespread stories of divine or unearthly intervention in human events can be found in the many great flood myths.
There are flood myths all over the world, not just in the Bible. You can find them all throughout South America. You can find them in Native American traditions. You find them in the Celtic traditions, the legend of the Ragnarok, the deluge. It's in Asia. Native Africans have flood myths. So the story of Noah is not an isolated event that only happens in the Bible. It's part of a bigger story.
The oldest documented flood myth is the story of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The ancient Sumerian tale was discovered on a series of clay tablets dating back thousands of years.
Utnapishtim has a story which is almost identical to the story of Noah. There's only a few slight differences. In the Utnapishtim story, the beings that spoke to him and warned him about this spoke through the walls of his house. And his house then became the craft that was used to evacuate.
Like Noah, Utnapishtim collected every type of animal in anticipation of the flood. But could it have really been possible to collect every type of animal and fit them all in a single craft? Or might the ark have been a metaphor for another, much more advanced and extraterrestrial form of transportation device?
The ark in the Sumerian story is shaped like a cube. We now have physicists that are developing hyperdimensional physics models in which they're actually plotting out the mathematics of how these higher dimensions are constructed and what they look like. It is called a tesseract. A tesseract is a cube within a cube. So it's possible that the cube that was referred to in the original Epic of Gilgamesh could be describing a Stargate portal that used this type of hyperdimensional geometry as a way to ensure that Utnapishtim and all the animals and the people that he saved wouldn't be here on Earth at all. And that's how they were able to survive the deluge.
Mainstream archaeologists believe ancient civilizations such as those found in the remote Pacific Islands, Asia, and South America developed independently from each other. But ancient astronaut theorists contend that similarities in building styles and beliefs found in these cultures suggest that a worldwide trade route may have connected them to each other.
But just like we have airports today around the world, in ancient times with the Vimanas, there would have been hangars for the craft, airports for them to land, and those airports would have been situated in strategic places around the world. And that's exactly what we see in remote places.
Could the complex set of lines covering Peru's Nazca Plain or the mysterious plateau above Mexico's Oaxaca Valley be evidence of runways for a worldwide air transportation system?
One of the unusual archaeological sites in Mexico is a place called Monte Alban. That is also a mountain where the top of the mountain was completely cut off and leveled to make a very flat tabletop mountain. And there's a megalithic city there too that's extremely old. This was probably some kind of Vimana airport.
the Vimanas could be kind of missing link between the single cultures in the world, because they had just a very short time to flow from one part of the world to the other.
Legends of air travel are also found in ancient Africa and the Middle East. According to the Kebra Nagast, a holy book of the Ethiopians, written sometime before the 2nd century AD, the Queen of Sheba was once given a gift of a flying carpet by King Solomon of Israel.
The Kebra Nagast is one of the most important texts you've never heard of. The Kebra Nagast means the Book of Kings, and it is the most sacred book of the Ethiopians. In it, King Solomon, it's described, he had access to some type of a flying machine. And in that part of the world, the term flying carpet was always used very liberally. My question is, did they really mean actual flying carpets, or was it another term with which to describe some type of a flying machine?
This was the original chariots of the gods that Eric von Däniken talked about. The flying magic carpets of the Arabian Nights stories. There are traditions in the Middle East of King Solomon having this airship and flying to different places in the Middle East, certain mountains, which are known as the Mountains of Solomon. These may have been certain airports or landing areas for these Vimanas. Nicholas Roerich, famous Russian-American explorer who traveled all through Central Asia and Tibet in the 1920s, he too claimed that Tibetans had traditions of King Solomon flying to Tibet in this aircraft.
The Kebra Nagast also describes how King Solomon used his flying airship to make maps of the world. But could these have any relation to other ancient maps some believe may have been made by extraterrestrials?
Some of these maps show the world not as it looks today, but as it looked during the last ice age. And this is really hard to explain. Everybody's heard of the Piri-Reis map, but they've perhaps not heard of the Rontius-Phineas map or the Mercator maps that show Antarctica in great detail, hundreds of years before Antarctica was even discovered.
One of the most referenced stories of ancient aircraft is found in a surprising place, the Bible. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet describes a flying chariot containing wheels within wheels and powered by angels. Although Bible historians suggest Ezekiel was speaking symbolically about the terrifying enemies facing Israel, could this be another example of an alien visitation and proof that prehistoric aircraft existed?
In the story of Ezekiel's throne chariot, this flying vehicle that doesn't seem to have any means of propulsion, if we thought of the word angel as representing something like celestial energy, it sounds much more like a spacecraft then, because some of the angels are going back and forth. Well, that sounds like flames. That sounds like propulsion. Some of them are wheel-like. Well, those sound like flying saucers.
Our ancestors weren't idiots. Ezekiel saw something that was so frightening to him that he fell to his knees. Then, out of the glory of God came this being in these bright clothes that looked like metal and told Ezekiel, "All right, man, we brought you here. We want you to measure this monument, this building." And Ezekiel asks, "Well, why should I do this?" And the being says, "That's why we brought you here." And then you have 40 pages in the second part of the book of Ezekiel with measurement after measurement after measurement of this gigantic building, in which, by the way, the glory of the Lord landed.
Scientists agree that the best chances of finding alien life will be on planets similar to ours. And descriptions of extraterrestrials seem to resemble humans in many ways. Some ancient astronaut theorists draw a surprising conclusion from these facts, suggesting that aliens might actually be human.
It is odd that many of the descriptions of aliens are effectively humanoid, and this raises an interesting possibility. One idea that's been put forward is that these are not extraterrestrials at all, but they're time travelers from the future.
They could be us from 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 years from now. Let's assume for a moment that 10,000 years from now on this planet, if we all survive, that time travel was created. They've invented it. Just like the time machine of H.G. Wells' days. They can go back or they can go forward. So let's assume 10,000 years from now, we decide to come back to see us. Maybe they have changed physically. They look like the alien Greys or whoever they may be.
It could well be that ancient astronauts might not be creatures from other planets at all, but time travelers from 2720 in a time machine.
Time travel is an essential concept for science fiction. But would it be possible for flesh and blood humans to find a way to transport themselves through time with current technology? Would this enable us to cover the vast distances of space?
If I could travel close to the speed of light, I could reach the year 3000, say, in a couple of years. I have to get very close to the speed of light for that, but it's doable, and we know that this isn't a theory, this is real physics. We can demonstrate these time-warping effects. So you can reach the future quicker by traveling close to the speed of light.
The concept of time travel was first proposed by Albert Einstein in 1905, when he published his theory of special relativity.
Ancient astronaut theory says that astronauts visited us a long time ago from somewhere else. The technology involved in doing that, we would assume, would be similar to what we understand now. I mean, we know special relativity is a law of physics. It holds anywhere in the universe. Ancient astronauts would come all the way here and travel these large distances and not age that much relative to their home planet. Because if you're going close enough to the speed of light, you will have slowed down time enough that when you get back, hundreds, thousands, or even millions of years could have passed.
One limitation to this method of travel is that because a spacecraft has mass, it theoretically cannot reach the exact speed of light. The resulting reduction in velocity would then dramatically increase the amount of time needed to cross the vast universe.
Well, there's definitely many theories about how extraterrestrials got here, how their propulsion system got them to planet Earth. They're surely not coming here the way we go out into space. They'd never get here. They are finding different ways. They have either developed a new form of propulsion, or they're able to travel through what I've always believed, wormholes throughout the universe that would instantaneously put them here.
The idea of wormholes was first proposed in 1935 by Albert Einstein and his longtime collaborator, Nathan Rosen. They began to explore the possibility that space and time could literally be bent to create a time travel shortcut.
Wormholes have not been detected. They're a postulated structure in space that involve actually taking, if you want to think of a sheet of paper, bending it in half and connecting the two pieces that you get together. A wormhole is thought to do something like that. You know, space gets warped and it connects between two different parts of space. You know, there's predictions about what they would look like, there's theories about them, but we haven't detected one yet. You're not actually ever traveling faster than the speed of light, you're just cutting corners.
You don't actually have to go light speed and travel for light years to someplace. You literally go there through a wormhole and through hyperspace and bang, you're there.
If you can have a wormhole in space, then it could be turned in principle into a time machine. And so travel back in time as well as forward in time would then be possible. The problem is, where do you get your wormhole? It's not inconceivable that wormholes were made in the Big Bang, coughed out along with everything else. There might be one out there in the universe we could harvest and adapt to form a time machine.
The Mahabharata. In this sacred Indian text, written in the 8th century BC, King Ravita is described as traveling to the heavens to meet with the creator god Brahma, only to return to Earth hundreds of years in the future. Some researchers believe this Hindu tale may be one of the oldest records of successful time travel in the ancient past.
There's a story of a king called Ravayata, and he is taken into space to see the gods. And when he returns to the Earth, he finds that many ages have gone by, and it's been hundreds of years. And this is the kind of thing that would happen to space travelers and in time travel as well. You think you're gone for only a few days, but when you return to Earth, you find out that you've been gone for hundreds of years.
Like the legend of Chaco Canyon, similar tales of time travel can be found all around the ancient world. In Japan, the legend of Urashima Taro details a fisherman's visit to the protector god of the sea, Ryujin, in an underwater palace for what seemed like only 3 days.
When he returns to his fishing village, he finds that it's been 300 years that he's been gone. And his house is in ruins. Everybody he knows is long dead. No one remembers him or his family.
And in the Hebrew Bible, descriptions of the prophet Jeremiah in Jerusalem are eerily similar to both of these accounts of time travel.
Even in the Bible, the prophet Jeremiah was sitting together with a few of his friends, and there was a young boy, his name was Abimelech. And Jeremiah said to Abimelech, "Go out of Jerusalem, there is a hill, and collect some figs for us." The boy went out and collected the fresh figs. Of a sudden, Abimelech hears some noise and wind in the air, and he became unconscious. He had a blackout. After a time, he wakes up again, and he saw it was nearly the evening. So he runs back to the society, and the city was full of strange soldiers. And he said, "What's going on here? What is Jeremiah and all the others?" And an old man said, "That was 62 years ago." It's a time travel story written in the Bible.
Ever since the infamous UFO incident of 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico, there have been thousands of reports of extraterrestrial sightings and even first-hand accounts of alien abductions. Described as humanoids with large heads and small bodies, researchers believe these beings might, in fact, be an alien species that some call the Greys.
These aliens look not too dissimilar from us. They have heads, they have hands, they have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, a nose, a rudimentary mouth. They certainly, in their descriptions, appear to be pretty close to us, or what they kind of look like is very, very early science fiction concepts of how the human race would eventually evolve over the eons.
If you look at the extraterrestrials that are described, the Greys that are related to the Roswell incident, you'll see that their forms in many ways resemble what we might project or predict that we could look like in the future if we became a spacefaring race.
The Roswell crash in New Mexico, in fact, happened coincidentally close to the birthday of the Egyptian goddess Isis. So you have to wonder, too, if these so-called alien bodies that were allegedly found at the Roswell crash with thin bodies and big heads, if they weren't some kind of time-traveling extraterrestrials.
Is it possible the beings believed to have been recovered at Roswell traveled here from the star Sirius, just like the Egyptian goddess Isis, as some ancient astronaut theorists believe? And might they be coming here using advanced expertise in space-time technology?
I would think that it's quite possible that the alien visitors, if they're proved to be the way we think they are, that they're using certain forms of teleportation, perhaps, or certainly they have propulsion devices that can approach the speed of light.
What we do know is that the physics of our planet, quantum physics and string theory, have moved the ball so much further than it was in the last century to saying there are no mathematical restrictions on time travel to the future or to the past. And that once you know that the physics community is saying there are no restrictions, it's just us finding out how do we do this.
Time travel is basically the same as teleportation. We could go from place to place on Earth in a matter of milliseconds. This would revolutionize all kinds of travel. At the same time, our connections between us and any other civilization, and including civilizations on other planets as well.
But just who really are these otherworldly creatures called the Greys? Is it possible they came to Earth not from outer space, but from the future or the past? Or might they actually be human time travelers?
There are various theories as to what the Greys are. There are stories that they are beings which have been around since time immemorial and are still around. But there are also encounters which people have had, and in giving these encounters, it has been said that really the Greys are us from the future. And that they really have traveled back in time because somehow we have genetically created a situation whereby the Greys are no longer able to procreate, and that they have to therefore come back to our times to sort of remedy the situation.
People back in the 60s and 70s kind of speculated what would human beings look like in 1,000 years or 2,000 years. And the idea was that we would expand our intellectual knowledge, so our brains would get bigger, and we'd have machinery that would basically do all the physical tasks for us that we do with our hands now. We really would become almost physically inert beings. And if you look at those early concepts of the future of the human race, they kind of look like the standard traditional gray alien, the Roswell alien.
I'm a believer in time travel. I say nothing will be impossible for us in the future. Even if you think it's completely crazy, it will happen. Whatever humans are able to think, to calculate, even to fantasies, will one day become reality. Sometimes I ask myself if these UFOs are not time travelers. It's our own people of the future.
Considering the scientific advancements from the last century alone, might it be possible future humans have discovered the ability to travel in time, as some ancient astronaut theorists believe? Are they, in fact, the so-called visitors that have been recorded throughout the centuries? Or are they otherworldly aliens who have mastered travel through both time and space. Perhaps the answers can be found, not in the here and now, but in another place and time. Kingman, Arizona, May 1953. At the height of the Cold War, an unidentified object reportedly crashed in the desert sands. What remained was allegedly sent to America's most top-secret facility, Area 51. But it wasn't until 45 years later, in 1998, that a retired military engineer named Bill Uhouse came forward to make a stunning claim. The military didn't just have the extraterrestrial technology, they had an actual living alien.
Uhouse claimed that he worked in a secret laboratory, supposedly in the Papoose Mountains of Area 51 in Nevada, and that since 1953, the American government had an insectoid alien that was working with them. His name was J-Rod.
J-Rod supposedly assisted the military in understanding and duplicating the incredible power systems and futuristic technology that was combined and created for the Kingman craft.
Shortly after Bill Uhouse broke the story, microbiologist Dan Burish came forward to confirm his claim. But according to Dan Burish, J-Rod claimed that he was not an alien. What he revealed was something even more shocking.
This insectoid alien, J-Rod, said that he had actually come from our future, and that at some time in the near future to us, there is a catastrophe on this planet, and much of mankind is destroyed, and that mankind splits into two different species. And one of these species goes and lives underground, and while underground, they develop these insectoid traits, which is exactly what the Hopi and Zuni and even Navajo legends say, that during the transition period between the third and the fourth worlds, this above world of today was not habitable, and they had to go underground and live for some time with what they called the ant people. And you have to wonder if perhaps J-Rod is actually an insectoid human being from our own future.
Could the accounts of J-Rod confirm that the Hopi stories of ant people were more than just mythology? And if the so-called insectoids really do exist, is it possible that they are not aliens, but humans from the future?
Aliens appear to be a part of our human evolution over thousands of years. A lot of it has to do with our reproductive systems. Maybe they're actually trying to create a new race, possibly that will be able to withstand atmospheric changes here on Earth, or potentially lead us to a point where we have to leave the planet.
But if humans are someday forced underground by a cataclysmic event, does it even make scientific sense that we would evolve to have insect-like characteristics? According to some scientists, we are part insect already.
The work on the human genome has indicated that possibly up to half of our DNA may be the result of transposons. That's a fancy word for jumping genes, genes that can jump from one species to another. Recently it was shown that Rhodnius, this is the sucking insect that spreads Chagas disease, not only can spread the trypanosome, the disease-causing agent, from organism to organism, it also can spread its own genes to those organisms. Humans get Chagas disease. So far, they've not tested humans for this insect DNA. Odds are we do have some of these insect genes in our system. We know some of these transposon probably came from diseases we caught when our ancestors were bitten by insects.